I used to believe love could withstand anything. When I met my ex-wife, Danielle, it felt like one of those whirlwind romances straight out of a movie. We were young, reckless, and completely captivated by each other. I was 24, fresh out of college and ready to take on the world. Danielle was 21, vibrant and full of life. She had a laugh that could brighten even the darkest day, and I fell hard. In the beginning, we were inseparable. Late-night talks, spontaneous road trips, and promises whispered in the quiet of the night made me feel like we had something indestructible. But reality has a way of testing those promises. By the time we'd been together for 2 years, the cracks started to show. Danielle was passionate, but with that passion came unpredictability. She had a habit of leaving when things got tough. The first time she left me was after our biggest fight. I had been working long hours to save up for an engagement ring, and she accused me of prioritizing work over her. It spiraled into a heated argument, and before I knew it, she was packing her things. I was devastated. I spent weeks trying to reach her, but she wouldn't answer my calls or texts. Then one day, she showed up at my apartment, tears streaming down her face. She said she'd made a mistake, that she couldn't live without me. I took her back without hesitation. I loved her too much to hold a grudge, and I thought this was just a bump in the road. But then it happened again, and again. Each time, the reason was different. Sometimes it was my job. Other times it was her feeling trapped or unsure. Each time, I begged her to stay. Each time, she left. And each time, she returned, promising it would never happen again. By the third time, I was exhausted. I had given Danielle everything I had to give, my time, my energy, my heart. But love doesn't work if it's one-sided. And I was starting to realize that Danielle's love for me came with conditions. Still, I couldn't bring myself to let her go. Our on-again, off-again relationship lasted for 5 years before we finally got married. Looking back, I wonder if I said I do because I truly believed we could make it work, or because I was afraid of losing her for good. Either way, our marriage was as turbulent as our dating life. Danielle's tendency to leave whenever things got hard didn't magically disappear when we exchanged vows. 3 years into our marriage, she left me again. This time, it was for good, or so I thought. She said she needed to find herself, and there was no convincing her otherwise. I was shattered, but I didn't chase her this time. I couldn't. I spent months picking up the pieces of my life. I threw myself into work, hit the gym, and tried to rebuild my confidence. Slowly, I started to feel like myself again, and that's when I met Emily. Emily was everything Danielle wasn't, steady, kind, and understanding. She didn't play games or make me feel like I had to prove my worth. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. After a year of dating, I proposed. This time, I was sure. Danielle didn't reappear in my life until the week of my wedding to Emily. She showed up out of the blue, looking as beautiful and chaotic as ever. She told me she'd made a mistake, that she wanted me back. She said she'd change, that she couldn't imagine me marrying someone else. Her timing was impeccable as always. Danielle's unexpected reappearance shook me to my core. Standing at my doorstep, she was a living ghost of my past, draped in the same magnetism that once captivated me. Her eyes, filled with tears, begged for a chance to talk. Against my better judgment, I let her in. The moment she stepped inside, memories of our turbulent years together came flooding back. The late-night arguments, the makeups that felt like temporary fixes, the time she left me crumbled on the floor, every painful moment resurfaced. But so did the good ones. Her smile, her laugh, the way she used to hold my hand when she was happy. I made a mistake, she said, her voice trembling. I thought I needed space, but all I found was emptiness. I've been lost without you. I didn't know what to say. I was days away from marrying Emily, a woman who had brought stability and joy to my life. And here was Danielle, the woman who had shattered me more times than I could count, asking for another chance. I'm not the same person I was, Danielle continued. I've changed. I know what I want now, and it's you. Please, don't marry her. Her words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. My mind raced. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave, to remind her of all the times she'd abandoned me. But another part of me, a smaller, quieter part, felt the familiar pull of her presence. I took a deep breath and told her the truth. Danielle, I can't do this. You had years to figure out what you wanted. And now that I've finally moved on, you're back? That's not fair to me, and it's definitely not fair to Emily. But Danielle wasn't one to back down easily. She played every card she had, reminding me of the history we shared, the promises we made, the dreams we once had. She even brought up my flaws, subtly suggesting that Emily might not love me if she truly knew me. It was manipulative, but it worked. Doubt began to creep in. What if Danielle really had changed? What if she was my one? And I was about to make a terrible mistake. I decided to talk to my best friend, Alex, someone who had seen me at my worst after Danielle left me for the last time. Over a beer at our favorite bar, I laid everything out. The unexpected visit, her plea for another chance, my confusion. Are you seriously considering this? Alex asked, his tone sharp. Dude, she broke you. Multiple times. Emily has been nothing but good for you. Don't let Danielle's drama mess up the best thing that's ever happened to you. His words hit hard. But they were exactly what I needed to hear. Alex was right. Danielle had always been about chaos and uncertainty, while Emily was about peace and partnership. Still, the doubt lingered. When I got home that night, I found Emily sitting on the couch, going over last-minute wedding details. She looked up and smiled, and for a moment, all the turmoil Danielle had brought back into my life faded away. But Danielle wasn't done. Over the next few days, she bombarded me with calls and texts. She sent long messages reminiscing about our past, telling me how much she regretted leaving me, how she never stopped fighting for us. It was overwhelming. Then, 2 days before the wedding, Danielle took things a step further. She showed up at Emily's workplace. I only found out because Emily came home unusually quiet that evening. When I asked her what was wrong, she handed me her phone, where Danielle's text message to her was open. I know you love him, but I love him more. I've loved him longer. Please, do the right thing and let him go. He deserves someone who knows his soul, not just his surface. Emily looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of hurt and confusion. Is there something you're not telling me? She asked. I felt trapped. I couldn't lie to Emily. She deserved better than that. So, I told her everything, about Danielle showing up, about her pleas for another chance, about my struggle to fully let go of the woman who had once been my whole world. To my surprise, Emily didn't yell or cry. Instead, she simply nodded. I need to think, she said quietly, then went into the bedroom and closed the door. That night, I slept on the couch, staring at the ceiling and wondering if I'd just ruined everything. The thought of losing Emily was unbearable. But I couldn't deny that Danielle's reappearance had stirred something in me. Nostalgia, regret, or maybe just unfinished business. The next morning, Emily came out of the bedroom, her face calm but serious. I love you, she said, but I need to know that you're marrying me because you want to, not because you're afraid of being alone or because you're running from Danielle. So, I'm giving you a choice. If you need time to figure this out, I'll understand. But if we're doing this, I need to know your heart is with me completely. Her words were a wake-up call. For years, I had let Danielle's chaos dictate my life. But Emily was offering me something Danielle never had: stability, trust, and unconditional love. Still, the decision wasn't easy. I had to face the part of me that still held on to the past, that wondered what could have been. But in the end, I knew what I had to do. I spent the rest of that day grappling with Emily's ultimatum. She had every right to demand clarity, and I admired her strength in doing so. Yet, The shadow of Danielle lingered, a ghost of old love refusing to be exorcised. Emily, true to her word, gave me space. She stayed with a friend that night, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The apartment felt emptier than ever, and the silence forced me to confront the two lives stretching ahead of me. One with Danielle, tangled in our shared history, and one with Emily, where hope and stability thrived. But Danielle wasn't about to let me process in peace. She escalated her efforts in a way that felt both desperate and alarming. The next morning, my phone buzzed incessantly. Ignoring the texts and calls initially, I finally caved. Her latest message stopped me cold. "If you don't meet me tonight, I'll come to the wedding and tell everyone the truth. You owe me this." My stomach churned. The threat was clear, but it was the phrase "the truth" that unsettled me. What could she possibly mean by that? Had she fabricated some story? Was she bluffing? Despite my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. We chose a neutral spot, a coffee shop where we couldn't make a scene. Danielle arrived looking every bit the part of someone who had lost everything. Her disheveled appearance was so unlike her usual confident self that, for a moment, I almost felt pity. "I can't believe you'd throw us away," she began, skipping the pleasantries. "Do you remember how much we went through? How much we meant to each other?" "I remember everything, Danielle," I replied, my voice steady. "But what I also remember is you walking out on me 3 times. You're here now because you're scared, not because you love me. And that's not enough." Her expression hardened, the tears vanishing as quickly as they'd come. "You think she's better for you? Do you even know her like I do? I've been part of your life for years. I know your flaws, your struggles. She doesn't know the real you." I shook my head. "That's where you're wrong. Emily knows me better than you ever did, because she sees me for who I am, not who she wants me to be." But Danielle had one last card to play. She leaned in, her voice a whisper. "Did Emily tell you about her ex?" The question caught me off guard. "What are you talking about?" She smiled a bitter, triumphant look. "Ask her about Ryan. Ask her why they broke up. You'll find out she's not as perfect as you think." I didn't respond. Danielle's words were designed to plant doubt, and I hated how effectively they worked. I left the coffee shop feeling like I'd stepped into a trap. That evening, Emily returned home. I couldn't shake Danielle's words, and they festered inside me until I finally blurted out, "Who's Ryan?" Emily froze, her face a mixture of shock and pain. For a moment, I regretted asking, but I needed answers. "He was my fiancé," she said softly. "We were together for 5 years. He cheated on me a month before our wedding. I broke it off, but it wasn't easy." Her honesty disarmed me, but it also stung. Why hadn't she told me this before? "I didn't tell you because it's in the past," she continued. "It's not who I am now. I didn't want you to feel like you were competing with a ghost, the same way I didn't want to compete with yours." Her words hit me like a punch. She was right. Emily had never once asked me to prove myself or to choose between her and my past. She had given me room to heal, to grow, to move forward. Danielle, on the other hand, had always pulled me back into chaos. I reached for Emily's hand. "I'm sorry," I said. "I let her get into my head, and I shouldn't have. I love you, and I don't want to lose you." Her eyes softened, but the tension didn't completely leave her face. "Then you need to make a choice. Fully, completely. If you have any doubts, you need to tell me now." I nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I choose you," I said, my voice steady. "I choose us." The relief in her eyes was palpable, but I knew the hard part wasn't over. Danielle wasn't going to back down easily, and I needed to put an end to her interference once and for all. The day before the wedding, I met Danielle one final time. This time, I chose a location, a quiet park where we could talk without distractions. "I need you to stop," I said as soon as she arrived. "Whatever we had, it's over. You showing up now doesn't change that." She scoffed. "You think you can just erase me? Pretend like I never existed?" No, I said firmly. I'm not erasing anything, but I am moving on, and you need to do the same. Danielle's face twisted with anger. You'll regret this, she spat. One day, you'll realize what you lost, and it'll be too late. I didn't respond. I walked away, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. Danielle had been a huge part of my life, but she no longer held power over me. The next day, standing at the altar with Emily, I felt lighter than I had in years. As I looked into her eyes, I knew I'd made the right choice. But just as the officiant asked if anyone objected, the church doors creaked open. Danielle stepped inside. The silence in the church was deafening as all eyes turned toward Danielle. She was standing in the doorway, wearing a bold red dress that screamed defiance. My heart dropped. I had thought she'd finally let go. But here she was, uninvited and unapologetic, making a spectacle of herself. The officiant paused, visibly confused, while murmurs rippled through the crowd. Emily turned to look at me, her expression a mixture of concern and frustration. I squeezed her hand gently, silently pleading for her trust. Danielle stepped forward, her heels clicking against the floor as she made her way down the aisle. The audacity of the moment made my blood boil, but I forced myself to remain calm. Danielle, I said firmly, my voice breaking the uneasy silence. You don't belong here. Please leave. She ignored me, her gaze fixed on Emily. I'm sorry, but I can't stay quiet anymore, she declared, her voice trembling with emotion. You deserve to know the truth before you say, I do. Emily stood her ground, her expression unreadable. The truth, she asked calmly. Danielle hesitated for a moment, her confidence faltering. But then she straightened, her voice sharp and accusatory. He's lying to you. He's not over me. He's been meeting with me behind your back, trying to figure out if we can fix things. Gasps echoed through the room, but Emily didn't flinch. She simply turned to me, her eyes searching mine. She's twisting things, I said immediately. Yes, I've spoken to her, but only to get closure. I told her it's over. She doesn't want to accept it. Danielle laughed bitterly. Closure? Is that what you call it? Do you think she'll believe that after everything we've shared? Emily raised her hand, silencing us both. Enough, she said, her voice calm but commanding. She turned to Danielle. Why are you really here? Because this doesn't feel like love. It feels like desperation. Danielle's composure cracked. Her lips trembled, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I once knew. The one I'd loved, but also the one who'd caused me so much pain. She faltered, glancing around at the judgmental stares of the guests. Finally, she looked back at me. I just wanted you to know that I never stopped loving you. And I thought, her voice broke. I thought maybe you hadn't stopped loving me either. Her words hung in the air, heavy and heartbreaking. Emily took a step forward, her tone softer now. Danielle, I don't doubt that you're hurting, but this isn't the way to heal. You can't build a future by clinging to the past. Danielle's eyes welled with tears, and she nodded slightly, as if Emily's words had struck a chord. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the church. The tension in the room eased, but I knew the moment wasn't over. I turned to Emily, my heart pounding. I'm sorry, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I should have handled this better. I should have told you everything sooner. Emily looked at me for a long moment before she spoke. It's not just about how you handled it. It's about whether you're truly ready to let go of her. I am, I said firmly. I let go of her the moment I chose you. She just didn't want to let go of me. Emily's expression softened and she nodded. Then let's finish what we started. The officiant cleared his throat, visibly relieved as he resumed the ceremony. Later that evening, during the reception, I couldn't shake the surreal feeling of what had transpired. Danielle's appearance had been unexpected, but in a strange way, it felt like the final chapter of a book that had been open for far too long. As Emily and I danced under the soft glow of fairy lights, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I'm proud of you." "For what?" I asked, genuinely curious. "For facing your past and choosing to move forward," she said. Her words stayed with me, a reminder that healing isn't just about letting go. It's about making the choice to embrace what's ahead. But the night wasn't over yet. Near the end of the reception, one of my groomsmen approached me with a concerned expression. "You might want to check outside," he said quietly. I frowned, confused but curious. Stepping out into the cool night air, I found Danielle sitting on the curb, a bottle of champagne in her hand. She looked up at me, her makeup smudged from tears. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said quickly. I didn't know where else to go. I sighed, torn between compassion and frustration. "Danielle, you can't keep doing this to yourself or to me." "I know," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I just needed to see you happy. I needed to know I made the right choice all those years ago." Her words took me by surprise. "What do you mean?" Danielle looked down at the bottle in her hand. "I left because I thought I was holding you back. You had so much potential, and I was afraid I'd ruin it. But when I saw you moving on without me, I realized I'd only ruined myself." For the first time, I saw Danielle not as an antagonist, but as someone who was deeply broken, just trying to make sense of her pain. "I hope you find peace," I said gently. "But that peace won't come from chasing what's gone. It'll come from building something new." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. As I walked back inside to join my wife, I felt a strange sense of closure. Danielle's chapter in my life was finally over, and for the first time, I was truly ready to write the next one. The days after the wedding were a whirlwind of joy and relief. Emily and I returned from our honeymoon feeling more connected than ever, ready to start this new chapter together. But something unexpected lingered in my mind, Danielle's parting words. One afternoon, as I sorted through a pile of wedding cards and gifts, I came across a small envelope with no name. Inside was a handwritten note. Asterisk, "I hope you're happy now. Truly, thank you for teaching me how to let go. Danielle, asterisk." It wasn't what I expected, but it brought a strange sense of peace. For years, our story had been a weight on both of us, keeping us tethered to the past. Now, it felt like she'd finally found the strength to let go. Just as I had. Emily found me holding the note and gave me a curious look. I handed it to her, and after she read it, she simply smiled. "You gave her what she needed," she said softly. "Now focus on what we're building." Her words were grounding, a reminder of how far I'd come. With Emily by my side, I didn't just feel loved, I felt free. Over the next few months, life settled into a rhythm that felt almost too good to be true. We moved into a new house, started talking about family plans, and built a future that felt solid and unshakable. Every so often, I thought about Danielle, wondering if she'd found her own peace. But those thoughts no longer came with guilt or regret, just hope. Hope that she, too, had found the courage to move forward. For so long, I believed my story was defined by heartbreak and failure. But now, I see it differently. My story isn't about who I lost. It's about who I chose. And this time, I chose right. As Emily and I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sunset, she leaned into me and said, "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" I smiled, wrapping my arm around her. "Yeah, the best beginning